Hello, and welcome, adventurers. Today we're going to be talking about dungeons as if they were monsters. Essentially, there was this really cool idea that I came up with when I was reading a bunch of different mangas that all had dungeons as like a living creature, or really unique concepts to dungeons that people had to deal with. And so I decided to combine them all and turn dungeons into a living creature that needs to be slain itself, something that learns and adapts and becomes essentially a menace on its environment that you have to deal with. And I thought that it would be a really cool idea to either make a campaign based around the idea of hunting down these dungeons and having to remove them, or just the idea that a dungeon like this, a living creature being a dungeon, would be an extremely unique encounter for your group to have to deal with. So without further ado, let's get right into the document, shall we? Alright, let's make big me disappear, little me appear. And here we have dungeon. Dungeons, also known as adventurers' labyrinths or monster dens, are massive creations of rooms, halls, and traps that are filled to the brim with creatures that plague the fantasy realm. These have never been thought of as more than unlucky finds for the common traveler or for brave souls, lucky treasure troves, but in reality, a dungeon is all but luck. Dungeons are actually living, breathing monsters themselves. Well, breathing isn't the word I should use, but they do in fact have a beating heart. It's an invasive species that moves in and destroys ecosystems. They appear in areas that are thick with magic energy, possibly over a magic ley line or in the location where a powerful mage or magical beast such as a dragon once called home. They will even begin to form from anywhere that once was home to a large amount of positive or negative energy, such as a monster graveyard or an abandoned temple. They have also been known to form from locations where a catastrophic event once took place, such as a meteor striking the ground, the destruction or creation of an artifact, or even a large battle. Once the dungeon has formed a proper core, it spreads its roots out to pools of magical energy and creates monsters within itself. These monsters formed are the only monsters that might be unknown or uncommon to its area, for these are the original creations by the dungeon to be its last line of defense and its first wave of creatures to hunt or lure food to the dungeon. The new monsters are brainwashed and begin to indiscriminately prey upon the area, and then, as the monsters grow, the dungeon feeds on them to grow further still, and when there's nothing left in the area to devour, it spreads its roots to new areas. The creature known as dungeon is a neutral evil creature by nature, but doesn't gain purpose or motivation till it has grown to a large enough size to finally hold power in the world around it, usually drawing other forms of intelligent evil to its hold, where it will soon either fall under the corruption of the intelligent evil that has a stronger will than its own, or it will draw an intelligent evil that is weaker will and soon dominate its mind, consuming the being's every thoughts and then using the creature as a tool for its own gain. Many adventurers and townsfolk commonly mistake the dungeons as mindless pathways and structures and only ever focus on the evil creatures within. This is the defense mechanism of the dungeon to stay alive and keep feeding, almost like a crab in a shell, but the shell is alive. Dungeon creatures and creatures that dwell in a dungeon long enough start to grow a unique catalyst within themselves. This is usually mana that has undergone crystallization into a gem hidden within the body that is often destroyed in battle, or when being carved up unless the individual knows what they are doing. These gems are worth a lot and also store mana. This is what we will call a supplement for the dungeon. Dungeons feed off of energy, whether it's a mana, positive, negative, or most commonly life energy. This is what sustains a dungeon. It does not matter how many of the creatures within die, so long as the core gets destroyed or forgotten, those lost creatures will just be remade within time and after their mana is reabsorbed back into the dungeon. What truly vitalizes a dungeon is the lives of adventurers and monsters that get lured to its depths. Since many don't ever see the dungeon as a monster, a dungeon never loses strength and will only ever grow. But if one were to harvest the catalysts of every monster they come across and never lose a soul on the way, they would invoke the dungeon's final trump card for survival. When a dungeon has been drained of too much mana and does not reabsorb any back, it will start to create a monster from its remaining mana in hopes of destroying the creatures responsible. usually returning the mana stolen from it as well. This creature is usually deadly and can be seen as a world threat depending on the size of the dungeon. Some have been known to create a monster capable of destroying worlds for the sole purpose of staying alive, but no one should ever worry about a dungeon destroying the world. Any dungeon that grows strong enough to create such a creature will surely understand that destroying the world will destroy themselves, and dungeons are notoriously selfish when it comes to self-preservation and ironically optimistic about succeeding in their final attempt. Never does a dungeon stay empty for long. Sooner or later something will come along and keep it alive. Many dungeons learn the value of items and will create treasure rooms using its most common food source, the adventurer. Adventurers will go into dungeons, slay some creatures, and leave. This is the story as old as time, but what they leave out is how many parties came before and lost everything. It was these parties or even nearby travelers attacked by the monsters that originally created these rooms of treasures that then lures more to its grasp. A dungeon is no fool, of course, and will not risk its life to keep such mundane trinkets and baubles. If a party invades and takes all the treasure, then a dungeon will pay it no mind. It can always amass more treasure. After all, it's no more than a lure and has no value to the dungeon as a whole. The only item a dungeon might try harder than normal to defend are powerful magic items that it is able to feed off of, but even these trinkets will be let go if the invading party is too strong for the dungeon to handle. The dungeon's core is hidden deep within, usually with no access to it, at least no normal or natural access, and is often hidden either in the center or at its lowest depth or highest altitude. The core will often look like a single eye with horn-like bone structures wrapping it, as well as flesh and many roots of flesh expanding from it. A core will sometimes gain a personality so strong they will see themselves as unstoppable, and will sometimes take the place as the final creature within its depths, usually growing appendages and developing the ability to detach from its vine structure momentarily, but this is rare. You most likely have to hunt for the core, for it will hide itself well and with some of its strongest walls. One should take note that a core is capable of seeing everything that happens within their dungeon, but once engaged seems to lose some of its all-seeing ability, but should still be noted they possess great sight in almost any situation. Do not let your guard down upon finding a core. Just because it hides behind walls and monsters doesn't mean the creature is weak. On the contrary, dealing with a dungeon core can be one of the most hardest fights a party could ever endure. The creature is a master at staying alive, but is rarely ever challenged directly, so what it lacks in experience it makes up for in raw power. Most dungeon cores are capable of mimicking the abilities and spells of the creatures it once hosted. This is where a dungeon can be really dangerous. Not only could it combine the abilities of different creatures you may never have fought at the same time, but it will also have the abilities of creatures you might never have encountered in your exploration of the dungeon due to the fact of how old the dungeon might be and how many times it could have been cleared and what kind of creatures it could have hosted once upon a time. Doing a proper history check of a dungeon is the best way to ensure there is no surprise when it comes to face the dungeon core. For game masters. This is for the people that want to create a dungeon core. A dungeon core's CR can be no lower than 1. Use whatever normal dungeon creation resources you have at your disposal, whether you create it by hand or you do something like I do, and I use the Donjon RPG tools. Donjon RPG tools is able to create a dungeon from scratch. Essentially, you just go to Donjon RPG tools, Pathfinder's down here, or whatever roleplay you're using, and you just go to the random dungeon generator. You can choose the level of the dungeon, you can choose the size of the dungeon, you can choose all sorts of things with the dungeon, including room sizes, room layouts, and then you can construct the dungeon, and bam, it has everything before you. I guess I chose a big dungeon, so it's taking a while to load. But essentially, it will generate this really unique and elaborate dungeon. It'll tell you room layouts. Here we go. This is an insane dungeon. If you create this for your party, fully expect them to be enveloped in this game or this dungeon for the entirety of it. But yeah, you have corridor features, wandering monsters, and these are the monsters that will be what you build your dungeon core around, including the monsters that are in the rooms. You must always check each individual room, which is kind of, I'm not going to look in every single room of this dungeon. This dungeon was way too big. I generated way too big of a dungeon. You should probably avoid this as well. Otherwise, you're going to have just insane things. If you are a masochist GM and you love this stuff, go ahead, build a dungeon this big. But I definitely chose one a little too big for an example here. But anyways, a dungeon's core CR can be no lower than 1. Use whatever normal dungeon creation resources you have at your disposal. I prefer to use Donjon RPG tools. And use the dungeon level as the dungeon core's CR. When creating your core, you'll be using the stats of the creature you're filled the dungeon with to create the stats of the core itself. Keep this in mind when deciding what creatures to add to your dungeon. At the time of creating the dungeon, you must add an additional monster to the dungeon to be the core's guardian. This monster can be anything so long as its CR is the same as the core's and must be placed in a location right next to where you decide to place the core. This is the core's most direct tool to interact with the world, especially at the earlier stages of its life. Once a core reaches CR 5, and for every 5 after, you may add another creature of your choice following the same guidelines, but only one needs to be next to the core. The others can be placed throughout the dungeon to throw off any would-be dungeon slayers. You also get to choose one creature to be the dungeon trump card monster. This is a creature that must be 2 CR higher than the dungeon core and must have the advanced template, but the template CR modification is not counted towards the 2 CR higher requirement. This creature can only be summoned if the core feels it's in danger of losing too much mana or is in direct danger, meaning that it ain't going to summon it if adventurers are just going through the dungeon like normal, taking loot and stuff like that, killing creatures and leaving. It ain't going to summon it. It's just not going to do it's just not going to do it. But if there is signs that the players are doing something to upset the dungeon, such as harvesting the catalysts from the monsters, removing the fact that it can gain its mana back, that is when it will summon the advanced creature and send it after the adventurers. Core base stats. The base stats for a dungeon core are all 10, plus the CR of the dungeon core, meaning a dungeon could have stats from 11 to 30 depending on its CR. A dungeon core is considered unable to move by default and has true seeing throughout the dungeon, but when engaged will only benefit from all-around vision and blind sight. By default, a dungeon core has a slam attack using its roots that can attack anything within its dungeon, treating its CR as a base attack bonus, as well as magic missile spell-like ability that can be used at will and treats the CR as a spellcaster level, and uses its highest mental stat for this and any spell-like ability or spells learned. The dungeon has an hit die of 1d20 and is always a large creature that takes up a 10 foot by 10 foot area, and the dungeon core gains bonuses to all saves equal to its CR. Within the creature, with the creature added to the dungeon during creation, you will be able to add more abilities to the core's repertoire. For each different creature type living in the dungeon, add one ability of your choice from that creature to the core. You may also instead have the core change a raw ability score to that of the creatures in place of gaining an ability from it. These abilities learned can be anything from natural armor, senses, special abilities, forms of movements at the same speeds as it was that you took it from, immunities, resistances, natural attacks, special qualities, spell-like abilities, spells, auras, spell resistances, or damage resistances. You will also get to add 1 feat from each different type of creature within the dungeon. Dungeon cores are not very skilled, and so they only get a number of skill points equal to their CR plus their intelligence modifier. They also start with no known languages and can only learn a language for each intelligence modifier or each rank in linguistics, other than that they have the perfect telepathic bond with their guardian creatures, able to control them no matter where they go, and can sometimes learn telepathy from the monsters they host, which they prefer when trying to dominate intelligent monsters within them. Keep note that just because the dungeon may have had a human wizard and a human fighter, together they are still human, and the core can only learn one thing from one of the humans. This counts towards any creature that has multiple versions of themselves in the dungeon. It should also be noted a dungeon guardian creature can only venture out of the dungeon up to 1 mile per CR of the dungeon core before being drawn back to its creator. If a guardian creature is ever taken alive away from the dungeon, the type of mana emanating off the guardian has been known to attract monsters from nearby areas, usually causing chaos, so it's always best to slay these monsters before bringing them back. Finally, you may add what is called a history rating or HR to the dungeon core. This is if you wish to make your dungeon stronger by having it gain abilities from creatures that are not in the dungeon at this point, but were there at another point in history. A dungeon can never have an HR higher than the dungeon's actual CR. If you decide to give your dungeon an HR, you may add abilities to the core from any creature you desire so long as the creature's CR is equal to the HR you are granting the dungeon. You may also instead give your core an ability from multiple creatures so long as their combined CRs do not equal higher than the HR. Keep in mind that giving a core an HR makes them all the more deadly, and your players should have had every chance to notice it was an old dungeon with history. An example of a dungeon core. Let's say I make a small level 1 vermin themed dungeon with the following creatures inside: a giant spider, a dark mantle, a scourge, and a were-rat. It doesn't matter how many of each I added when creating the core. Now I get to add one CR1 creature of any type that is the core's protector. I think I'll choose a ghoul. And for my trump card monster, I'll add a direwolf with the advanced template. This means I can pick abilities from these creatures. I choose to learn the special attack Constrict from the Dark Mantle, the special attack Paralysis from the Ghoul, the DR10/Silver from the Were-Rat, immune to mind affecting effects from the Giant Spider, Dex 19 from the Scourge, and finally Con 21 from the Advanced Direwolf. The feats I will take will be none from the Giant Spider because it doesn't have any feats, Weapon Finesse from the Scourge, Improved Initiative from the Dark Mantle, Skill Focus Perception from the Direwolf, and sadly the Ghoul only has Weapon Finesse, so I get nothing from him, resulting in the following core. A Dungeon Core, Neutral Evil Large Aberration, Initiative +6, Senses, All-Around Vision, True Seeing when not engaged, Blind Sight, AC 13, Touch of 13, Flat-Footed 9, that's +4 Dex, -1 to Size, Hit points of 15, 1d20 +5, Fortitude +6, Reflex +5, Will +1, DR 10/Silver, Immune to mind affecting effects, Speed of none, Melee Slam +5, 1d6 plus Grab and Paralysis, Special Attacks Paralysis 1d4 +1 rounds, DC 13, Elves are immune to this effect, Constrict 1d4 +4, Grab any size, Space 10 feet, Reach 10 feet, can hit anywhere within dungeon, Spell like ability at will magic missile, Strength 11, Dex 19, Con 21, Int 11, Wisdom 11, Charisma 11, Base Attack bonus +1, Combat Maneuver bonus +2, Combat Maneuver Defense 16, the feats Weapon Finesse, Improved Initiative, Skill, Focus, Perception, Skills, Perception +7, Languages none, Special Qualities none. That is an example of CR1 Dungeon Core. If I felt this would still be too weak, I could have added an HR1, and we could have said the dungeon once hosted gnolls, and I could have used this to teach my dungeon core the power attack feat, and could have given my dungeon core a strength score of 15 in place of learning an ability, which could have increased my slam attack to 1d6 +2, or if I was more worried about taking damage, I could have added the gnoll's natural armor +1 instead. And that is how you create a dungeon core. As you can see, it's pretty simple when you get down to it. It's all about building a dungeon. It's really easy if you use Don John's dungeon generator because it has the dungeon level already in mind and you don't have to create that yourself. All you gotta do is just choose a level, probably avoid gargantuan, huge, and large, maybe stick to medium and below dungeons. It all depends on how detailed you want it to be and how dangerous you want it to be, because the bigger it is, the more variations there are that could be in it. And keep in mind, the more variations you have in the dungeon, the stronger the dungeon can get. And you want to avoid it. You want to keep your dungeons on theme. So keep that in mind. The more different types of creatures you have in your dungeon, the more dangerous it is. So quantity of creature is probably better than quantity of creature types. And so yeah, it's just a really cool feature. I really love it. I really love the idea of making a venturing group of parties that are that have been taught what dungeons are, how to locate them, how to recognize them, and they're out adventuring looking for them. They have to do history checks and role plays with the locals to find out any information on the dungeon, to find out whether or not there was a history factor with it, what it might have hosted once upon a time, trying to figure out how dangerous it could be. Dungeons that one hosted a great wizard or once hosted a powerful beast, stuff like that. It means that it could have a powerful ability from that, and so they need to research that, and so they have to do more role play and interact with people to find this stuff out. Then you go into the dungeon dive, and we all know a dungeon dive is a huge role play experience alone, but adding the fact that you need to now kill creatures a proper way to carve out their stones to weaken the creature, or you risk not doing that at all. There's all sorts of different techniques. You can harvest it to lure out the great danger creature right away, to deal with the dangerous guardian as soon as possible, or you can leave it and take on both the dungeon core and the guardian creature, the dangerous guardian creature at the same time, because once you find the core is going to summon the guardian creature to protect itself. So yeah, it's just a really cool concept. I worked on this a lot. I think this is a great idea. If you have any ideas on how to change it, on how to maybe how it should work, or you have ideas or you want to post dungeons that you've built, go ahead, post that stuff in the comments. I'd love to see it. You want to come talk about it, come see me at a stream. I'd love to talk about it then. Otherwise, I hope you guys are enjoying my videos. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and I hope you guys have a safe adventure.